My friends, hello and welcome to this twisting workshop. Today we're going to Gainesville. It's not very far from Atlanta. It's in Georgia, in the state of Georgia in the United States. And Gainesville likes to call itself the chicken capital of the world. With its 40,000 inhabitants, almost everyone is involved in the chicken industry. And so today we're going to a factory called FFG. So FFG is based in Gainesville, and we're roughly at the end of January 2021. It was during the time of COVID and all that. That's why you'll see that from time to time in the images I show, there are people wearing masks. So when it comes to chicken, we're going to talk about the process that interests us today. Chemical accident, my friends, with an extremely tragic outcome, you'll see. So the accident we're going to talk about today involves a process which is the cryopreservation of chicken. So if you're preparing chicken at home, you cut it into cubes and put it in the freezer. And also, if you're going to prepare bag after bag and stack them on top of each other, it's like stacking sheaves, one crushing the other. What will you end up with? You'll end up with chicken that looks like a total mess. All the cubes are deformed, stuck to each other. There's ice, there's a layer of ice around them. That's the water that was exuded, right? And that froze. And that's not what we want to get in the food industry. So what do? We do this. We have facilities that process chicken, so nuggets, stuff, cooked, pre-cooked, all that, all those things. And then what we're going to do is temporarily soak all that in a bath. So it's a kind of long bathtub, right? We're going to dip it in liquid nitrogen, believe it or not. So we put liquid nitrogen here. It's supplied by a company called Messer. We're in the United States. Messer is a German company, but it's their American branch that delivers. Messer is a small competitor to Air Liquide. We all know the French company Air Liquide. I think it's even part of the CAC 40. And here we have Messer delivering liquid nitrogen that's stored in tanks outside the facility. So liquid nitrogen is minus 196 degrees Celsius. So it's extremely, extremely cold. When you put the chicken in there, in less than a minute, it's frozen all the way through, and it still looks good. Liquid nitrogen, well, there are 2 or 3 little issues with it. I'll tell you which ones. The first issue is that there aren't really a lot of safety rules related to liquid nitrogen. Why? Because look, right now I'm talking to you, I'm breathing nitrogen. The atmosphere around us is made up of 78% nitrogen and about 21% oxygen. So right now we're breathing nitrogen. Nitrogen, well, you see, it's not considered dangerous. Here, instead of being in a gaseous state like we're inhaling now, it's provided in liquid form at minus 196 degrees. That's all. So from a regulatory standpoint, it's not considered explosive, corrosive, flammable, any of that. So there's not a heavy regulation around it, whether in regulations or even in insurance codes and all that, because insurers play a very important role. Because when an insurance company is going to cover a risk, it is able to make demands to set requirements regarding transportation, handling, staff training, and all that. But the N2, if you want, it flies under the radar. Messer, the German company, as I was saying, delivers it to this poultry company, and that's it. This poultry company has no knowledge of the danger, has no idea what they're doing. The stickers they were given, stickers showing warnings about a number of dangers, were later found in a closet with people sticking them. There weren't even any. It's not that the safety measures or the training or anything else were inadequate, they were non-existent. They treated, if you will, liquid nitrogen like cold water, that's all. There you go, we put it in there and that's it, okay? Now, what happens is that when you put, liquid nitrogen, well, when you look at it, it's liquid. It's transparent. If you put it on your hand, it won't burn you. Still, be careful and don't play with it. When you pour it on your hand, it feels like putting your hand under a cold water tap, nothing more than that. Why? Because when it goes on your skin, it's at almost minus 200 degrees. And your skin, let's say, is at 30 degrees. When it touches your skin, it feels a temperature difference of 230 degrees. It's like that drop of water falling on a plate on a copper plate. It's extremely hot, almost white hot, and will stay on the plate for a while without drying up quickly. Similarly, when it falls on your hand, it will just evaporate and not move. But be careful. If you have a ring, a wedding band, a watch, anything like that, it will stick, and that's it. You're going to enter a world of pain. In any case, that's not the real danger. We're not discussing the danger of pouring it on someone else today. That's not the issue. We're talking about its ability, the ability to become a suffocating gas. Why? Because if we take N2 in liquid form, liquid nitrogen, and we start pouring it on the ground, it'll make smoke like that. It'll rise. Well, it's not really smoke. It'll evaporate. And be careful, it's normally invisible. We can't see it. But why do we see smoke? It's the same way as when you open a freezer, you see air coming toward you. How do you recognize it? You see a kind of moisture in the air. It's obviously an encounter between the cold air from the freezer and the warm, humid air outside. So condensation happens, that's all. That's why you see it, but normally it's invisible. So now when nitrogen starts to build up, and as buckets of nitrogen start being poured onto the floor in a room like this, what's going to happen is that it will push the air out. It will start to push the air out. And why? Because there's one thing, liquid nitrogen, since it's cold, if I pour it on the floor, it starts to turn into gas, so it warms up a bit. It just needs to reach, let's say, minus 190 degrees, and that's it. It becomes a gas, it evaporates. So what it's going to do is, since it's cold, it will stay at the bottom, and the warmer air, of course, will do what? It will rise above. So here's what we'll get. If we're in a room like this, we'll get this. Let's say this is the floor, okay? This is my floor. Well, here, right at floor level, I have 0% oxygen. So maybe if I go up to 1.5 meters, let's say, I get here, maybe I have 10% oxygen, you see, and so on. So the higher I go, the more oxygen I have, okay? But if you take the area from 1.5 meters down to the floor, the conditions are deadly because there's no oxygen, okay? Another thing you need to know, and this is another danger, my friends, because look, if you take, we'll talk about it on other occasions, if you take cyanide, for example, HCN, you can smell it. It has a pleasant bitter almond scent, you see, but it kills, be careful, it has a bitter almond scent. You take another one that's extremely deadly. We'll talk about it on other occasions. It's H2S. Well, H2S has a rotten egg smell. Also extremely deadly. It kills, that's it. And actually, N2 nitrogen, since we breathe it all the time, well, our brain, our nose are not equipped at all to detect it. That's the problem. Plenty of other gases that can kill, poison, all that. We're equipped to smell them, to detect them, okay? Nitrogen, it happens immediately. Just like that, in silence, there's nothing. The brain doesn't detect anything at all, okay? And the nose doesn't either, and that's it, okay? So we're going to go to that fateful day of January 28, 2021. And so we have the chicken going through this thing, this tub, and we have a level here. The level here is measured by a pipe that sends, well, there are lots of ways to measure, but here what we do is we use a pipe that sends bubbles, like that, which sends bubbles nonstop. So why? How does this measurement work? And I'll tell you why in terms of measurement too. Once we grasp the process, we'll see the tragedy that follows. So watch. Put a straw in a glass of water and blow into it. Don't inhale. If you blow, you'll feel some resistance. Well, if you take a longer straw and you go, I don't know, for example, into a bathtub of water or into a pool to blow and push air through, you'll see that it actually takes more effort. The difficulty you'll have blowing into the straw or the pressure needed to blow into the straw will depend on the depth of the liquid. The deeper the liquid, the more effort it will take. So we're going to use this phenomenon to measure depth. So quite simply, we have a tube here, and there's a system that sends nitrogen gas this time into it. It bubbles, it goes blub, blub, blub like that. And actually what happens is that depending on the resistance, we measure. So we measure the height of the nitrogen here. And why is that? Because every time chickens fall in there, well, it creates a boiling phenomenon and we lose nitrogen. So nitrogen will evaporate. When it evaporates, we have a chimney there that captures it, and then it goes out and will be released outside. And what do? we replace it. So we have an inlet pipe there that will replace the liquid nitrogen as we lose it. So regularly we will replace. What happened that day? Let me tell you. So that day, it's 9 a.m. We're about an hour before the factory opens, which was going to start its shift at 10. And here's what happens. We have this tube here that was improperly secured. There was a manufacturing defect in the equipment. This equipment had a manufacturing defect. There's a retaining ring that was omitted. And normally, this tube is held by several rings. It was held by only one. And look at what it did. Look at what it did. It rotated like this. So the tube rotated around its own axis. Donc, so when it rotated, what happens? You can clearly see that now the depth the tube measures is lower than it should be. You realize the depth is reduced now. All right? We don't have enough depth anymore. So, and the second problem, and this is a problem we always try to avoid in aviation, it's that we have only one point, what we call a single point. We have only one point. If it fails, if there's a problem, there's nothing to prevent a disaster. You see, we're not in an Airbus, my friends, we're in a chicken factory. So as I was saying, what happens is once this tube bends, well, the system that injects nitrogen realizes that the required depth hasn't been reached. So what is it going to start doing? It's going to start sending more and more liquid nitrogen into the system to increase the depth, to maintain the reference depth, this one, which it will never reach. So what is it going to do? Well, there are workers who arrive. Now it's almost 10 o'clock, so it starts to fill up. We have 2 workers arriving. So 2 workers are there. They're like, what's going on? They don't understand. So they're there, and then at some point, this tub, this bathtub, if you will, this basin is going to overflow. And then the liquid nitrogen starts to go onto the floor. And once it touches the warm floor, it starts to evaporate. It starts to evaporate and rise. And they don't really understand what's happening. And then suddenly, one after another, in a matter of seconds, they're going to fall. Bam! They're going to fall to the ground. They're going to fall on the floor. So they're going to end up here in this area, because when they fall, where is the head when they fall? When they fall, they hit the ground, and the head is now in the densest part. Again, since it's a very cold gas, it's going to go toward the ground. So at ground level, there's 0 oxygen, there's pure nitrogen. So they're going to breathe it in, and they're going to pass away gently. So these 2, the first ones who arrived, are going to die. It's over. So what happens is that for a while, we don't realize what's going on. And then suddenly someone arrives, they're like, whoa, there's a problem. And they sound the alarm. They sound the alarm, people start running, the managers, the supervisors, and all that. But then, be careful, no one calls the firefighters. The fire station is 10 minutes away. When they finally call them, they'll be there in 10 minutes. But the hospital is also 10 minutes away. But they don't call. They say to themselves, well, we'll handle this as a last resort. We'll take care of it among ourselves like a family matter. So for about 15 minutes, they're going to make attempts. So go into the room to look for the 2 people who are on the floor. So one of them goes in, he gets there, and then bam, he falls. There's another one who says, well, I'll go too. He falls. There's another one who says, I'll hold my breath, and all that. He falls, and then after a while, it becomes like Stalingrad. So one of them says, well, maybe it's about time we call the firefighters. They call the firefighters, and when the firefighters arrive, there are 6 people in the room lying on the floor, unconscious. What the firefighters do is put on their breathing equipment. So they've got this air tank on their back, the mask, all that. They go in pretty much like you would go underwater, like you're a scuba diver. So they come in, they grab a person, and they take them out. This guy, he's between life and death. They put him in an ambulance and rush him to the hospital. 10 minutes later, he's at the hospital, and then 20 minutes later, he's declared dead too. So actually that day, we still ended up with 6 deaths, my friends. So we had 6 deaths in this tragedy. Just to tell you the stories, les histoires like this one, where people go in one after another into a gas-filled environment. I mean, the history of industry is full of stories like that. Sometimes it can be a septic tank, it can be a tank, there are places in the basement, there are fumes, it can be a well, someone goes in, they fall, another goes in, they fall, they fall, they fall. Here we have 6. There have been cases where there were even more than that. So it's still a tragedy. That's 6 deaths. And of course, as I told you afterwards, the company was convicted and had to pay a $1 million fine. In the end, FFG sold the site. Just to show you that this kind of accident, you see, people don't care. They just say, yeah, well, whatever, and let things slide. When something happens, it can cause deaths and sometimes force a company to shut down. Some companies have even gone bankrupt. The one I told you about last time closed down. This one had to sell the site and get out of there. SARE 2 and the people who delivered nitrogen to them were also convicted, and they had to set up a program to make sure their clients who buy gases or chemicals from them know what they're doing. Before, their logic was, I arrive, I deliver, and that's it. I let them do as they please. But very often they give these products to people whose job isn't to handle them. And then, well, it leads to the disaster you see here. There you go, my friends. So that was January 28th, 2021. And then you have to be very careful, because if one day you're in a situation like this, you see people who have collapsed, you don't know why. Honestly, don't rush in yourself either. Because the first rule of first aid, you learn it, for example, from firefighters. You learn it. I was also a first aid instructor in France and all that. And what you learn, the first thing, the first rule when giving first aid is not to put yourself in danger. Because if there's someone on the ground, it means there's a danger. It could be like here, a gas, even one you can't see or feel. It could be electricity. It could be something else. So first of all, make sure of your own safety. Otherwise, you start with 2 victims and end up with 6. That's it. Thank you, my friends, for listening to this video up to this point. The next one will be an aviation video, and from time to time, we'll have this kind of video. See you very soon.